So what I want to do here is try my hand at running over DC's Flashpoint event. And what I want to do is, instead of simply just covering the story, I want to get a little more meat and potatoes out of this. And the reason why I say that is, yes, Flashpoint was a story that was used by DC to launch the New 52, but Flashpoint was in and of itself its own cohesive universe. It had its own backstories for a majority of the characters. It was very self-contained. Of course, it was a universe that ceased to exist with the launch of the New 52, but it was still, it still had its own history, and the characters had been shaken up in a lot of ways that made them really intriguing from what we normally saw. And so what I want to do is I want to kick all this off with the story of whatever happened to Bruce Wayne. Now, to provide some context to this, I want to get into, Flashpoint issue number 1. And what happens is we basically pick up with the character of Barry Allen. Now, the reason why Flashpoint is such a big deal, the reason why it's so important is this was really like the conclusion of Geoff Johns' view of Barry Allen. And the reason why I say that is that throughout Barry Allen's entire history in DC Comics, before Crisis on Infinite Earths, when he died during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and when he came back during the events of Final Crisis, the one common theme in his life was his mother, Nora Allen. It was the common thread. If there was any one thing that he always wished he could do, it was go back and save his mother's life. But it was something that he never did because he knew that messing with the timeline would have caused problems. Basically, Geoff Johns came back with Flash Rebirth, not the 2016 DC Rebirth, but the original Flash Rebirth, which returned, or I guess told the story of Barry Allen's return to the DC landscape. And Geoff Johns retconned a lot of things. One of the most notable things that he retconned was the character of Eobard Thawne. If any of you guys have been watching the Flash TV show, and if you were watching the first season, Eobard Thawne played a villain who came from the future and traveled into the past for the purpose of going crazy and kind of killing Barry. But he was also his mentor, and the reason for that was within the comics themselves, Eobard Thawne had become obsessed with Barry Allen. He actually went as far as to make himself look like Barry Allen, and his goal was to basically be Barry Allen. But when he traveled into the past to meet Barry Allen for the first time, when he realized that he had arrived after Crisis on Infinite Earths was over and Barry Allen was dead, it had driven him to insanity. This was basically compounded by the fact that Eobard Thawne, after going to a museum, learned that he would be Barry Allen's worst enemy. And so instead of being, fighting alongside his idol, alongside his hero, learning that he would become the worst villain of Barry Allen drove him insane. And the result was that under Geoff Johns' retcon, which is a retroactive continuity, that's where writers go in and change the status quo of comic books, Geoff Johns came in and said that not only had Eobard Thawne traveled into the past to meet Barry Allen, but once he became a villain, once he accepted his role as being a bad guy, he had basically engineered the circumstances of Barry Allen becoming the Flash. He was the reason why Barry Allen's family had moved in the first place. He was the reason why Barry Allen had been struck by had been doused in a certain mixture of chemicals and struck by lightning when he originally got his powers. And the most significant thing is Eobard Thawne was the one that killed Barry Allen's mother. Now, the reason why this matters is because as we go over the course of this Flashpoint series, we'll learn that Eobard Thawne was kind of anchored. If we looked at Barry Allen as, a ship, that Eobard Thawne was the anchor attached to the ship, the chain basically being the timeline of Eobard Thawne's life. In order for Eobard Thawne to become the Reverse Flash, Barry Allen had to become the Flash in order for Eobard Thawne to want to become Flash in the first place. And so Eobard Thawne going into the past and making these changes was done to ensure that he would come into existence. Now, this is something I'd like you to keep in the back of your head because I know it sounds a little weird, but it'll all make sense once we actually start getting headlong into the main Flashpoint event. But picking up with this, of course, we're just kind of given, a little bit of the rundown on Barry Allen's life. We're kind of given a refresher basically by Geoff Johns. He talks to us about how Barry Allen found love, about how he was able to make a life for his own. He was able to fight along the Flash family, of course, Jesse Quick, Max Mercury, Jay Garrick, so on and so forth, Wally West. He fought alongside some of the mightiest superheroes on the planet Earth, and it's just giving us context into who he is or who he's been up to this point. And what happens is we switch to Barry Allen waking up, in the middle of an office building. Now, this is not uncommon. This is basically Geoff Johns kind of pulling a prank on us, so to speak, or kind of yanking the floor out from under us. And the reason why I say that is, Barry Allen wouldn't be a slacker by your standards of measurement, but because of the fact that he is a superhero, because he runs around, because he has so much going on, it wouldn't hurt to believe that he would have to catch a break, every once in a while. And this is what happens. Of course, his supervisor comes in and his supervisor, is disciplining him a little bit. But Barry Allen also hears that the villain, Captain Cold, is running amok. Now, something I want you to take note of here is they do not call him Captain Cold. Cold, they call him Citizen Cold. And as soon as Barry hears the name Citizen Cold, he learns that Captain Cold is basically a hero in this reality as opposed to being one of his most formidable villains. And so because of this, Barry is thinking that maybe, he's part of the Rogues. No one knows who the Rogues are. It's basically Geoff Johns throwing things at us extremely fast. And so Barry Allen goes to take off, and he initially looks at his hand for his ring, which houses his uniform, and he doesn't see it, and in the process trips on the stairs and falls down. And when he does, he comes face to face with his mother, Nora Allen. Now this is basically Barry Allen's life going into a tailspin because his mother's alive here. He doesn't know how she's alive, but he knows that she's alive. At the same time, he was also supposed to take her out to dinner for her birthday. And so this isn't as if, she's suddenly been brought back to life. She's been here all along. And so we as the reader are basically playing catch up here. We're trying to wrap our minds around how something like this could have happened. And so as Barry and his mother begin conversing with one another, what we also hear Barry doing is trying to gain his bearings with his mom, asking about the Justice League, asking who Superman is, asking who Batman is. She doesn't know who the Justice League are, and she's never heard of Superman. She doesn't believe him when he says that he's the Flash, but she has heard of Batman. Now this is when we switch to Gotham City, and this is when I want to start kind of breaking away from the main Flashpoint story for a second, and I want to start getting into the story of what happened to Bruce Wayne. So following Batman here, he's chasing a villain, to the, on some kind of a bridge and asking where the Joker's at. Now, something I also want you to take note of is how ruthless Batman is here right now. We expect, Batman to basically interrogate people. We expect Batman to not really torture them, but to certainly make them feel as though they're in fear for their life if they do not give him the information that he needs. His fear is really his greatest asset. But as this character goes tumbling down and actually seems to fall to her death, she's rescued by Cyborg. Now, Cyborg brings her back and basically keeps her alive, but he also begins to ask questions of Batman, what it is that Batman's doing, why he's so cruel now, why it is that he's so much darker. But there's also a little bit of recognition that this is simply just Batman's way, that Batman allows people to die, that Batman himself actually kills people. But something else is that he also chases villains to the same alley every single time he pursues them. And this is something I'd like you to take note of, because what we do is we switch into the actual story of whatever happened to Bruce Wayne. Switching back to Barry Allen and talking with his mother, because of the fact that things are so radically different here, one of the first things he wants to do is basically get with Iris West, the woman that he is, that's part and parcel to his life, the one person who's really more significant than anybody else. And the idea here is that maybe Iris knows what's going on, maybe Iris has an understanding of how everything's changed, but as soon as he gets to her place of work, as soon as he gets to the Central City Citizen, to her news organization, he finds out that she's actually in a relationship with somebody else, that she's not with him. And so again, this is just another example of how everything's kind of gone cattywampus, everything's gone haywalls. But we also learn that while Nora Allen is standing outside waiting on Barry, someone says, "How nice to meet you alive and well, Mrs. Allen." Now the indication here is that this is Eobard Thawne, simply by the art that we're given here, but we're not told for sure. And before, Nora Allen can investigate any further, Barry Allen returns and simply asks to use her car. And so from here, we switch back to Batman with Cyborg. And Batman is basically greeted by all these different superheroes, the most prominent superheroes as they exist at the time. Of course, Citizen Cold, but more notably than this is the fact that we meet Shazam, or what seems to be Shazam. Now, this is not Shazam as we know him, which is to say Billy Batson. Instead, these are basically the Shazam kids. This is an instance whereby it's Shazam composed of a multitude of kids, but instead of him being Shazam, being Captain Marvel, he's called Captain Thunder. And what happens is that these kids all shout Shazam at the same time, and they become a singular being. More so than that, we're also told that Wonder Woman and Aquaman are at war with one another. Now again, this is not information that's readily given to us. We're basically kind of being thrown all this information really, really fast by Geoff Johns, and he's kind of giving us teasers. He's kind of giving us, a preview of things to come. And this is one of the reasons why Geoff Johns is such a good writer, because he doesn't just throw all the origins and all the basis behind everything at you at one time. He basically whets your palate. He gives you a reason to keep wanting to come back. And so because of the fact that Barry Allen is aware of, that, or I guess he's told that Batman does exist, in his own, in his past, as far as he remembers, Batman operates out of Wayne Manor. And so he travels to Gotham City, he travels to Wayne Manor, he calls out for Alfred. Alfred's nowhere to be seen or found. He goes through, descends down into the Batcave, and instead of finding these huge supercomputers and, millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment, instead, he finds a couple of wooden desks, he finds an office chair, some kind of graph, and a picture hanging on a wall. And that's it. Of course, there's a gun there, but there's nothing there. This Bruce Wayne as we know him does not seem to exist. And so he's met with the arrival of Batman, and Batman immediately begins interrogating Barry Allen, but Barry Allen keeps calling him out by the name Bruce Wayne. And the person responds by saying that he's not Bruce Wayne, that he watched Bruce Wayne die. And it's revealed to us that Batman is actually Thomas Wayne. And so what we do here is we switch over to the story to officially whatever happened to Bruce Wayne. Instead of kind of teasing you guys with it, because I know you guys are probably wanting to know by now, we switch over to the story where we basically learn why it is that Thomas Wayne is Batman. This particular explanation is given to us in a story, Batman Night of Vengeance. And this is what DC did when they launched Flashpoint. Because it was its own cohesive universe, they gave us a series of 3-issue tie-ins, 3-issue story arcs that covered a lot of different things. Abin Sur, Hal Jordan, it covered Citizen Cold, it covered a lot of the characters that we've come to see as either important characters, villain or otherwise, in the role or in the life of Barry Allen, as well as more notable heroes, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and so on and so forth. And what we learn is that because Thomas Wayne seems to have survived his son's death, he's grown very bitter. But more so than that, he has basically turned, Wayne Enterprises into a giant amalgamation of casinos, so to speak. And basically, it's not Wayne Enterprises as we know it with technology and different things like that. It's just a whole bunch of casinos. And so because of this, business is a little strange here, but at the same time, he's proven himself to be wildly ruthless, but also home to some rather seedy individuals. The Penguin basically makes his way in Wayne Casino. Jim Gordon, of course, functions in a lot of the same capacity, but the main focus here, the main story here, really seems to be Joker. Emphasis is consistently put on Joker. Now, this particular story was written by Brian Azzarello. It was not written by Jeff Johns, but Azzarello does a really good job of giving us a reason to wonder who the Joker is, because the Joker is constantly being referenced over and over and over again. And so what we do is we learn from Jim Gordon that there have apparently been some children who have been kidnapped by the Joker, and Batman's idea is to find out where they are and of course to save their lives. And as he goes through during his investigations, he runs into Killer Croc. Now this again is a huge difference between some of what we've seen in the traditional DC comics and what we see in Flashpoint. Because Flashpoint is designed to be much darker than the traditional run of DC comics, we're shown an instance whereby Killer Croc is cannibalizing people. And this is always something that we knew, and there have been a few times where this is something that DC sort of, given credence to, but we've never actually seen an instance, at least that I'm aware of, where he has people hanging around and body parts missing because he's been eating them. And so the result is that as he and Thomas Wayne start to get into a fight with one another, Thomas Wayne does not hold anything back. Because he's so cruel, because he's so ruthless, he actually kills Killer Croc. He simply smashes him in the head with a machete, and that's the end of him. And so what we do is we also get a little bit of explanation here. We get a little bit of backstory here in the sense that while we are usually aware of the idea that, Thomas Wayne died in the traditional DC universe during the shootout with Joe Chill or during the robbery with Joe Chill, instead it was, it was Bruce Wayne who was killed by accident. Now, this is basically fleshed out over the course of this particular 3-issue story arc. It's kind of given to us in sections, but the final scene of this first issue, of Batman Night of Vengeance gives us the Joker, and it shows that the Joker, of course, is holding these particular people hostage, but the Joker looks markedly different. The Joker has long hair, the Joker's a little slender than we would normally expect to see him, and so we end up picking back up again with Batman's continued search of these missing children. Now, something else here is that Selina Kyle is not Catwoman. Selina Kyle is not, a cat burglar as we come to know her. Instead, she's a quadriplegic. She is stuck in a wheelchair and completely is totally unable to use the ability to walk. This is a marked difference. It's not the most significant aspect of the story, but it's designed by Brian Azzarello to show us how much things have changed, how drastically different things are. And so what ends up happening is we pick up with the Joker as the Joker's basically taunting these children. And the Joker seems to have an extreme, I wouldn't say obsession, I would say so much as an extreme issue, with children, the idea that the value of children should not be something that exists, because in the end, it'll drive you absolutely insane. This is basically kind of Brian Azzarello throwing hints at us, on what it is that happened with the Joker, what it is that made the Joker who they were. In addition to this, we also learn that Selina Kyle is basically operating as Oracle. Now, and this is also a huge difference here, because normally Oracle is Barbara Gordon, and instead it's Selina Kyle. Now, going through this, it may have been that I've missed something up to this point, but no explanation seems to have been given on what happened to Barbara Gordon. But I would surmise that she probably died at some point along the line, or she simply just never became Batgirl. But again, this may just be that I've missed something. It may be that I missed something obvious. If I did, feel free to post that down below. I'm sure a lot of you guys will. But in the end, because of the fact that Oracle serves a very similar purpose to how she does in the DC universe, the traditional DC universe, she's a broker of information. She is the back end of the technological side of the Batman, the Batman mythos. She gives, I guess in this instance, Thomas Wayne and Jim Gordon the information they need in order to succeed in their campaigns. And so we learn that, at least from Oracle, where it is that Joker is holding these children hostage. Now, when Jim Gordon makes his way into the room, initially all he sees is the Joker standing there with her guns over top of this particular child. And when Jim Gordon breaks in and shoots, he actually ends up shooting the little girl, the girl that had been kidnapped. And so this again shows us how sadistic and how dark this version of the Joker is. But more so than that, while this entire situation is being overheard, one, Jim Gordon is killed. He's stabbed, or I guess has his throat slit by the Joker. But two, Thomas Wayne is overhearing everything that's going on. He's also being sent a broadcast by the Joker, which seems to be in the form of a video, or at the very least in the form of a picture. It shows Jim Gordon being killed. But more so than that, because of everything that's going on, Thomas Wayne reveals to us that the Joker is actually Martha Wayne. It's the mother of Bruce Wayne. And so what issue number 3 does is it basically gives us the events that have unfolded in the life of Thomas and Martha Wayne after the death of Bruce Wayne. And what we learn is that when Batman arrives, when Thomas Wayne arrives, he basically, this girl being dead, he does what he can to, console the boy. He does what he can to try to keep this girl alive, even though she's pretty much gone. But the backstory that's given to us is that because Bruce Wayne had died, Martha did not initially crack. She showed early signs, of sort of losing her sanity, but it wasn't an immediate thing. Instead, it was a slow progression in the sense that Thomas basically kept telling her, you've got to try to get past this. We all have to try to get past this. We all have to work on this as best we can. And what he says is the one thing he misses more than anything else, aside from Bruce Wayne, is Martha smiling. But she doesn't really seem to be snapping out of this psychotic break. She doesn't really seem to be getting past this, this insanity, that she's experiencing. And so what we're told is that Thomas Wayne uses his resources, uses his money to find the location of Joe Chill by going through some less than savory, sources. And in the end, once he locates Joe Chill, he basically beats him to death with his bare hands. And so the result is that when he comes back, when he comes home to his wife Martha, he tells her that Joe Chill's dead, that he's killed Joe Chill. But when Martha turns around, she's given herself a Glasgow smile, the traditional Joker smile where he has his cheeks cut, and she says that she's finally happy now, that she's finally smiling. And so this was basically the psychotic break. Of course, Thomas Wayne had her committed to an insane asylum, and this was her downward spiral to officially becoming the Joker. Now, while this backstory was given to us, as you guys probably noticed, we were also seeing Martha fighting her husband in real time, in the current moment, and again, he tries to convince her, he tries to get her to come back. Now, this is the big difference here, because in the normal DC continuity, by the time the conflict comes around, assuming that, we sort of skip past the origin story of the Joker, or the perceived origin story with the Killing Joke, and we pick up with, Batman's normal encounters with the Joker, by that point in time, he was long gone. Any semblance or any chance of returning to normalcy was out the window. The Joker was who he was, and he was going to be the Joker for the rest of his life. With Martha Wayne, it's not that way. It seems as though her current role as a Joker is not that far removed from when she was simply just Martha trying to deal with the death of her son. And this is apparent in the fact that Thomas Wayne tries to talk her back to normal. He tries to bring her back to normal. She's initially resistant, but what he says is, and this is actually kind of skipping forward a little bit in the sense of the main Flashpoint story, after conversing with Barry Allen, Thomas Wayne is basically told by Barry everything Barry remembers from his own life, that Bruce Wayne was the one who lived, Thomas Wayne was the one who died along with Martha, and that Bruce Wayne became Batman fighting crime in Gotham City. And this is what Thomas says, that, of course, assuming that Barry Allen is to be believed, that Thomas Wayne has the ability to go back and to make things right. He basically gives Martha the way the situation should have played out. He says that it should have been, both Martha and Thomas that died and Bruce Wayne that lived. And it seemed as though he was connecting with her for a moment. It seemed as though he was, she was starting to understand that she was starting to return. But in the end, her insanity kicks back in again and she basically runs off. And in the situation when Thomas Wayne is chasing her, she ultimately falls down a hole, which ironically enough is actually the hole that Bruce Wayne seems to discover in order for him to become Batman. She falls down the hole and she basically dies. She falls to her death. And that's the end of Martha Wayne as the Joker. But this is basically the story of how Thomas Wayne became Batman. So if you guys enjoyed this, drop a like, hit the sub button, become part of the Rob Corps, and leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think about this particular story, whatever happened to Bruce Wayne. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are, because in truth, assuming that there's interest in this, assuming that there's some measure of popularity, I wouldn't mind going through and kind of covering the Flashpoint universe, how characters changed, what happened with different people, so on and so forth. But with that being said, in the next video, we're going to kind of jump forward a bit with the main Flashpoint timeline. We're going to cover the rest of the Flashpoint event. Again, this was just kind of an experiment on the particular tie-ins, but yeah, I will catch you guys later. Peace.